Hello and good morning, everyone. So glad you have joined us for the Women in Business Summit. I am Candace Laing. I'm currently the chair of the board of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce and also the Chief Human Resources Officer with Nutrien. And it is my absolute pleasure today to be able to speak with and introduce you to, if you do not know of her already, Penny Wise, or as my notes say, the incredibly impressive Penny Wise. And it's not just my notes. I know this to be true. Penny and I both serve on the board of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. So I have really enjoyed getting to know Penny and am glad you get to hear from her today. So as I said, if you haven't met Penny, she is the president and managing director of 3M Canada. And also, in addition to being on the board of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, she is our co-chair of our Council for Women's Advocacy. So thank you for that, that leadership, Penny. And a little bit more about Penny before we get into our conversation today. She brings more than 2 decades of global marketing experience to her role at 3M Canada and has held a variety of senior leadership positions in business, commercialization, brand, corporate marketing, and has led many successful award-winning marketing transformation projects. She has, and we'll talk about it today, been such a champion for STEM advocacy, as well as a great role model for a woman in business and who is just thriving. So Penny, thank you for joining us this morning and having this conversation. Just really looking forward to it. We're going to kind of start broader, just a bit about women in business, and then in our conversation, we'll kind of get more specific into STEM, the STEM advocacy and your own STEM story. So just to kick off, welcome, and just curious, what's been on your mind lately in terms of your own views regarding where we at today, the current participation of women in our economy?
Well, thanks for the invitation, Candace, and thank you for such a lovely and warm introduction. I, uh, I, it's always nice to be called out for wonderful work, and it's always part of being a team. But I do love what I do, and it's such a joy to be able to work with you and others at the chamber in really taking Canadian business forward. So, as we think about business for the future, and we think about the current state of the Canadian economy, I really do think about the economy for the future. And I think we've all had a chance to really reflect about where are we going in the future, especially as we've come out of the pandemic, and what is it that we need to do to be ready? What does our industrial strategy for the future look like? Where do we need to be self-sufficient? Where do we need to leverage our trading expertise? And what skills do we need in order to be successful for that future? And even if you add in a net zero economy, what skills do we need for that, and what do we need to take forward? And that will require full participation. Our success as an economy will require full participation in the workforce. And when women account for 50% of the population of Canada, they should account for 50% of the workforce. And the work that women do, the roles that they have, the skills that they have, leadership, where they are inside an organization, that also needs to be reflective of the population. I think that as we look back on the pandemic, and I know we're steering away, but I look back at some of the statistics from the pandemic, and we think about how more adversely affected women were during the pandemic because women tended to own more of the service industries that were shut down, or women made choices to stay home to look after children or educate. So all of these played into that. We need to figure out ways that women can be more broadly in the workforce. And I think it was a reminder that to get equal participation, there were some things we needed to do. And I'm really proud of the Council for Women's Advocacy because we championed a number of these. The first one was we were one of the voices that said we needed to have fair, equitable, reasonably priced, quality daycare, $10 a day daycare, which did go through and is in process of being rolled out. You can talk about how successful it's going and some of the bumps that are along the way, but it's in motion. We also in the council talked about the need to support women entrepreneurs. Small and medium businesses in Canada are 98% of the businesses in Canada. Only 17% of those are majority owned by women.
Mm,
We also championed that we needed to get women into more of these high growth, high opportunity workspaces and segments of the market, and we needed to encourage women to, I don't know, reskill, find new opportunities, find new passions, and we needed to encourage young women to pursue what we would call now or called then non-traditional roles. And then finally, we need more senior women leaders.
mm.
I'm very honored to be working with you, Candace, as a senior leader. But there aren't as many of us as there should be as a reflection of the Canadian population. So I'm really proud of the work that we've done at the Council of Women's Advocacy to really advocate for those key areas. Is there lots of work still to do? Yes. Have we made as much progress? No. But we know the direction we need to go.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I mean, what I hear you saying is, in order to future proof our success in business and really a strong economy, I mean, that requires that full participation. And then looking at full participation, we need to dig into, the key areas to ensure, women in our country have full access to opportunities so they can thrive and fully participate. So senior leaders, looking at some of the things that were exacerbated by the pandemic in terms of, household support and for women that are still maybe the primary caregiver and those types of things. Coming back to what you said about full participation and being so important to, future proofing, our business success in Canada. Um, Full participation is a ways out of reach when we look at STEM and roles in science, technology, engineering, and math. And we know and we see a gap there in terms of the participation of women and girls. So I'm really curious because I know 3M has done significant work to kind of tackle some of these barriers. So women and other underrepresented communities have access to STEM education and jobs. So I'm wondering if you can share a bit about what's happening at 3M, but maybe just kick off with your own STEM story, because I think you have one.
Yes. And what I find is, as I talk to more people across the country, everyone has a STEM story of where they were lifted up or not lifted up, and how they transcended their STEM story. So, my STEM story starts in grade 3 and grade 4, and I had a math teacher, or I had a teacher in grade 4, who just absolutely convinced me that I could not do math and that I was terrible at math, and just I lost all confidence, and it was not good, to the point where I was put in a remedial math class, and I was incredibly humiliated to be in a remedial math class. I didn't need to be there, and I knew math, but I just had no confidence. And I just remember what an incredible blow to my confidence, to my psyche it was. And so after grade 4 and 5, I spent my entire elementary school career and high school career doing enough math to get by, and doing enough that I still had good grades to do the things that I wanted to do. But I always felt uncomfortable. I never enjoyed it. And it was always the worst mark that was always on my report card.
Mm.
And then I got into grade 13. So that ages me, and I am in Ontario when I went to grade 13. Um, I only needed like one math credit to graduate. And I took what I perceived to be the easiest math. And for whatever reason, there was a woman who was my teacher, and she taught in a different way, and she was patient and thoughtful, and all of a sudden I realized I could do math, and boy did I ever do well, and I had an amazing year and did amazing in that class. Then I moved to university, and my intention was to get a degree in history and then study law. And as I was building out my first year curriculum, I only had room for one, I had one last class to take, and there was only room at this particular spot. And the only thing that fit in it was calculus. And I had never taken calculus before, but I was like, I did good in grade 13 math. I did well in grade 13 math. I can take calculus. And again, I had an amazing professor who just was incredibly thoughtful about how he taught, connected, really energized the class. And at the end of my first year, calculus was my best mark. And I switched to a math degree, and then I did an MBA, and that's what got me to where I am today. And so I realized the power of having somebody positive in your life that can help you, that can raise you up, that can lift you, that can be a champion for you, and that can really change your STEM trajectory. And so my
Mhm.
personal, goal or bent or focus is how do I make sure that everyone is encouraged and that people are given the opportunity to demonstrate how they can be successful in STEM, and that nobody is stupid at STEM. That there's, that's almost a bad word to use, that's
Yeah.
that you can be successful.
Well, thanks for sharing your story. I think it's really important because a lot of us that we want to address um, gaps we see, but I think we often focus on the downstream aspects of those, right? Like in the workplace, or what are those barriers? But really, with the STEM gap, it goes right to those younger grades when we have girls and others maybe told or given the impression because of how we're socialized that those aren't roles for them or those aren't subjects for them that we've typically associated. And so I love your story because it's just such a good reminder of
Yeah.
looking right through and thinking right through to the young age and the trajectories that are changed at that age. So what has that, I mean, obviously it's a real passion for you. So what has that led to in terms of some of the impacts based on your efforts at 3M around STEM?
So 3M is a science company. That's what we do. That's the core, the white hot core of the company. So we're very passionate about science and scientists and technology and engineers and mathematics. I think we have more PhDs per capita than most companies. But annually, 3M globally does a study. We call it the State of Science Index, and we do it in about 10, 12 different countries around the world. And when we did the State of Science Index survey in Canada a number of years ago, one of the statistics that came back that said almost 70% of Canadians believe that underrepresented groups and underrepresented communities in Canada don't have the same access to STEM education and STEM opportunities.
Mhm.
And so, as a STEM company, as a company that really focuses on this, we really wanted to dig into that and understand why don't they have the same access, because we talk about it a lot. And so we embarked on what we've called a series of STEM talks, engaging with business leaders from across Canada, STEM advocates, and STEM experts to understand what are the barriers that underrepresented groups face and how can we remove those barriers. In our very first STEM workshop in our STEM with our STEM advocates, we realized that there are three areas that are key barriers. The first one is really around accessibility of education and how can I access it and how understandable is it and how relatable is it. So science gets taught in a very Eurocentric way as we think about Indigenous peoples and the connection to the land and the science to be learned there. How do we fold that in? If someone has a disability, if someone is blind, and you go to a math class and they talk about statistics and a deck of cards, you've never seen a deck of cards, or you have physical disabilities and you can't use the lab equipment. So it's about accessibility of education, both how you engage with education. The second area was around this idea of champions, and that mentors are fantastic, and it's really fantastic and important for you to see role models and people like yourself in roles that you aspire to be in, and it's important to have mentors. But what everybody needs, especially people in underrepresented communities, are champions. And we've all had champions. There's been somebody in our lives who has lifted us up or given us an opportunity or introduced us to somebody that's given us that trajectory to fly. And that's what we need to do to get underrepresented groups more engaged. And then the third area, which you alluded to, is it's not just about the words that we say for us, for business, for government, it's about the actions that we take.
Mhm.
And so we've deep dived into each one of those areas and worked to understand how can we be more accessible. How do we engage more champions? How do we be champions every day? And I personally take that to heart. How can I help somebody when I'm engaging with someone, when I'm talking to a young woman When I'm talking to somebody else in the organization, how can I introduce them to somebody? How can I put them on a project? How can I engage them so that they have a chance to really develop? And then in terms of actions, that's actually been some of the most fun work that we've done. We've had a number of dialogues with businesses from across Canada where we talk about what are we all doing and how are we lifting up STEM and how are we engaging? And we have STEM advocates come in and talk about what are the barriers they've faced. And so it's a really wonderful education and sharing opportunity and a moment to connect. And we also get the chance to understand where are people focused. You talked about it, Candace, that somebody's choice to be in STEM starts at a
Mm,
very young age. So what are those inflection points along somebody's journey? Google does great work with elementary school aged young women and girls because we want them to learn to program, so that programming is still cool. So grade 4, 5, 6, 3, 4, 5, that's kind of where girls are going to make the choice about, is that cool or is that not? So and other businesses are doing many other things at different points along the education spectrum, investing in university, investing in high school. So I think all of those pieces are great. A number of us businesses and 3M are very proud of our investment in First Robotics. We support an all women's team, a couple of all girls teams who are just amazing young women and so smart and so bright and so confident and enthusiastic. Uh, we also sponsor Skilled Trades in Skills Ontario. We sponsored the Women in Trades event that was held last month. So, really helping expose and open people's minds to non traditional kinds of roles. Canada needs hundreds of thousands of skilled trades workers, and why shouldn't they be women? And then finally, we're also helping underrepresented communities, women and girls in underrepresented communities get into science. We sponsor women and girls in science, and we help pay subscription rates so that $35 per person, we pay for that so girls can get into science and understand the opportunities. So again, it's all about those actions. And sorry, the last thing that we've done that I'm really excited about, that's why I saved it to last, is we recently did a STEM equity study across Canada to understand for underrepresented groups, women, LGBTQ plus, um, Indigenous minorities, to understand what are the barriers they face, because every underrepresented group faces similar but different barriers. And so now we have a really great picture of what
mm,
that looks like, and I'm happy to share that with anyone who's interested in the outcomes of that report, as well as where are the inflection points in someone's STEM journey. For instance, for young women, why do women make it all the way to second year university in a
mm,
science program and then drop out after second year of university? You've come so far. What happened? How do we stop that from happening? So many opportunities for us to support women in STEM and underrepresented communities.
Well, I have heard that same scary fact as well. Women maybe make it all that way, and then that becomes, this inflection point which we find ourselves at, right? But I just love everything you shared, Penny, because I think in terms of everybody listening today getting some takeaways in terms of what they can be thinking about to really address that pipeline issue of STEM talent that we need in our businesses and we need in the economy. There's so much to think about there in terms of championing and finding those key barriers to address and really, changing the course and trajectory along the way of all those inflection points and thinking that right through to young girls like yourself in grades 3 and 4 and then just thinking about the impact of that. But I love also how you've unpacked and really grounded all of this in the research and data that 3M has taken the time to really invest in. So, with that, I think we will wrap up this conversation and leave people with those good takeaways. Unless there's one last word or piece of great advice you would like to leave the group with.
I'm inspired by all of this because of who I work for. But and this will be embarrassing for my 25-year-old daughter, but I do this for my 25-year-old daughter because there was this moment during the pandemic where there was a statistic that came out that said women were sliding back, that we were somehow moving back 30 years of the progress that we've made. And so I really believe that as a leader, all of us as senior leaders, it is our job to make sure that we pass the baton to our daughters, to our nieces, to our young women that we're mentoring, and that they are actually moving ahead and in front of where we have been, and that we're not losing ground. And I think that's my duty to do that, to make sure that my daughter and her generation move ahead. So I'm really delighted to be part of the conversation and supporting and taking action to make that happen.
That's excellent. Well, thank you both for sharing your own STEM story and your own personal why in that, which is very touching, and for being just part of our Women in Business annual summit. Thank you, and again, thank you for co-chairing our Council for Women's Advocacy. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, and we will return to the summit now. Thank you, Penny.
Thanks, Candace.